The haunting whistle of a distant train echoed across the dusty plains of Copper Creek, Colorado, as Olivia Lawson stood at her window, watching another summer day fade into evening. At 38, the townsfolk had long since labeled her a spinster, too old for marriage in a time when most women were grandmothers by her age. The year was 1879, and the frontier town had grown from a mining outpost to a respectable settlement. Yet some things never changed, like the pitying glances from younger women who clutched their husbands' arms as they passed her millinery shop. Olivia's fingers absently traced the silver threads that had begun to appear in her auburn hair. She was not a vain woman, but the passage of time had been marked in ways beyond her control. Her face, once praised for its youthful glow, now showed fine lines around her eyes, evidence of years spent squinting in concentration over delicate hat designs and surviving the harsh western sun. Another order finished, she murmured to herself, setting aside the elegant feathered bonnet she'd been working on for Mrs. Holloway's daughter, a girl of 19 about to be married to the banker's son. Olivia tried not to feel the sting of irony. Her shop bell jingled, surprising her. It was past closing time, the sun already dipping behind the mountains. "I'm sorry, we're closed for the words died on her lips as she turned to face her visitor. He was tall, with shoulders broadened by years of hard work. Dust covered his clothes, speaking of long travels. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, green as spring grass after rain, and crinkled at the corners from years of squinting into the distance. "Pardon the intrusion, madam," he said, removing his worn leather hat. "I know it's late, but I just rode into town and noticed your light. I'm in need of lodging information and figured you might point me in the right direction." "The Harrison Hotel is just down the street," Olivia replied, unconsciously smoothing her skirt. "Though Mrs. Benson's boarding house is cleaner and costs less if you're staying a while." "Much obliged." He nodded but made no move to leave. Instead, his gaze traveled to the half-finished hats displayed around her shop. "Fine workmanship. You've got talented hands, Mississippi." "Lawson, Olivia Lawson." "Owen Yates," he replied with a slight bow. "Pleasure to make your acquaintance, Miss Lawson." "Mrs.," she corrected automatically, then flushed. It's what people call me out of courtesy, though I've never been married." A smile tugged at his lips. "Then they're mistaken twice over. Once for the assumption, and once for missing the chance." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. It had been years since a man had paid her a compliment, let alone one delivered with such unassuming sincerity. "You're too kind, Mr. Yates. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must close up shop." "Of course." He settled his hat back on his head, nodded respectfully, and departed. Olivia watched through the window as he crossed the street, his gait steady and purposeful. Something about him stirred a forgotten feeling in her chest, a fluttering she hadn't experienced since her youth, when possibilities seemed endless and time stretched before her like an open trail. She shook off the foolish notion. One kind stranger's words didn't erase the reality of her situation. With practiced movements, she extinguished the lamps and locked the shop door behind her, climbing the stairs to her small apartment above, where silence and solitude awaited. The next morning brought unusual commotion to Copper Creek's Main Street. Olivia opened her shop to discover a crowd gathered outside the marshal's office. Curiosity drew her closer. "Bank robbers hit Silver Springs yesterday," explained Mrs. Peterson, the butcher's wife. "Marshal says they might be headed this way." "Terrible business," muttered another woman. "3 men killed." Olivia's attention drifted from the gossip to a familiar figure speaking with Marshal Thornton. Owen Yates, now clean-shaven and dressed in a dark vest over a crisp white shirt. Something in his stance suggested authority. When he turned and caught her eye, Olivia quickly looked away, embarrassed to be caught staring. Later that morning, the bell above her shop door announced his arrival. "Mr. Yates," she greeted, her hands busy with a customer's hat measurement. "What brings you by?" "Business, unfortunately," he replied, waiting patiently until she finished with her customer before continuing. "I should have been more forthcoming yesterday. I'm with the Pinkerton Detective Agency, tracking a gang that's been robbing banks across Colorado." Olivia's eyes widened. "A detective? I never would have guessed." "That's often the point," he said with a slight smile. "I understand you've been in Copper Creek a long while." I was hoping you might know the area and its people well enough to notice if strangers have been passing through. Besides yourself? She asked, surprising herself with the teasing tone. His laugh was warm and genuine. Yes, besides myself. Olivia considered his request. I do notice most newcomers. People tend to need hats after long journeys, and there's only one milliner in town. For the next hour, they talked. Olivia shared what little she knew of recent visitors, while Owen explained just enough about his investigation to satisfy her curiosity without revealing confidential details. What began as a professional conversation gradually shifted to something more personal. How did a Pinkerton agent end up in Copper Creek? She asked. Tracking leads and following hunches, he replied. Before that, I was a Texas Ranger, and before that, just a cowboy trying to make his way. The war changed everything for a lot of us. You fought. He nodded, a shadow crossing his face. Union cavalry. Came west after it was over, like many men with nowhere else to go. And never settled down? Olivia ventured. Never found a reason compelling enough, he admitted. My work keeps me moving. What about you, Miss Lawson? What keeps you in Copper Creek? Family, once, she answered honestly. I came west with my parents in '59. They passed during the fever outbreak of '65. By then, this was home, and I had the shop. No suitors? Olivia laughed softly. There was one, before the war. He left for California gold fields and never returned. After that, she shrugged. Men want young wives out here. By the time I was 30, I was already considered past my prime. A ridiculous notion, Owen said, his eyes holding hers with unexpected intensity. Some things improve with time, fine wine, good leather, and people with stories worth telling. Before Olivia could respond, the door opened, admitting Mrs. Holloway and her daughter for a final fitting. Owen excused himself with a promise to continue their conversation another time. That evening, Olivia found herself taking unusual care with her appearance before heading to the town's only restaurant for dinner, something she rarely did, preferring to cook for herself in her small kitchen above the shop. She told herself it was merely a desire for company, not the hope of encountering a certain detective. The dining room at the Silver Dollar was crowded, and Olivia felt suddenly self-conscious as she stood in the doorway. Just as she considered leaving, a voice called her name. Miss Lawson, would you care to join me? Owen Yates stood from his table, gesturing to an empty chair across from him. The murmur of conversation around them dimmed momentarily as curious townspeople observed the interaction. Olivia hesitated, aware of the attention, then lifted her chin and walked to his table. Thank you, Mr. Yates. That's very kind. The kindness is yours, saving me from dining alone, he replied, pulling out her chair. They ordered, and as they waited for their food, Owen shared stories of his travels, descriptions of the towering redwoods in California, the vast open skies of Montana Territory, the bustling streets of Chicago. Olivia found herself captivated not just by the tales, but by the way he told them, with appreciation for beauty and without the bravado she'd come to expect from men recounting adventures. You make me wish I'd seen more of the world, she admitted. It's never too late, he replied. The world doesn't stop being worth seeing just because we've lived in it a while. Olivia smiled at that. A nice sentiment, but a milliner's life is rather stationary. Doesn't have to be. I've known traveling hat makers, or those who sold their shops to start anew elsewhere. Are you suggesting I abandon Copper Creek, Mr. Yates? His eyes held hers. I'm suggesting that at 38, your life is far from over, Miss Lawson. The evening passed too quickly. Owen insisted on walking her home, and as they strolled beneath the star-filled sky, Olivia felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. At her door, he removed his hat. Thank you for your company this evening. How long will you be in Copper Creek? She asked, surprised by her own boldness. At least another week. These men I'm tracking are clever. He hesitated, then added, perhaps we could dine together again tomorrow? Olivia nodded, trying to ignore the quickening of her pulse. I'd like that. Over the next several days, Owen became a regular visitor at her shop. He would arrive with fresh information about his case, but inevitably their conversations would veer toward more personal matters. Olivia learned that he'd grown up on a small ranch in Texas, that he had a younger sister in St. Louis, that he played the harmonica but claimed to do it poorly. In turn, She shared stories of her childhood journey west in a covered wagon, her father teaching her to shoot a rifle when she was 12, her mother's patience in showing her the art of millinery that would become her livelihood. "You have remarkable skill," Owen commented one afternoon, watching her nimble fingers shape a wire frame. "I've seen hats in New York shops that couldn't compare." "Flattery will not earn you a discount, Mr. Yates," she teased, feeling uncharacteristically playful. "Owen," he corrected. "After a week of dinners together, I think we've earned first-name basis." "Owen," she repeated, liking the feel of his name on her lips. Their evening meals had become the highlight of Olivia's days. They'd progressed from the restaurant to picnics by the creek when weather permitted, and once to dinner in her apartment above the shop, where Owen had insisted on cooking, revealing unexpected skill with simple fare. It was during that dinner that Olivia realized she was falling in love, a realization that terrified her. He would leave soon. Men like Owen Yates didn't settle down, especially not with women whom time had already begun to mark. Her fears seemed confirmed the next day when Owen arrived at her shop with news. "We've had a breakthrough," he explained. "One of the gang members was captured near Denver. With his information, we might be able to intercept the others before they strike again." "That's wonderful," Olivia replied, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning." His eyes searched hers. "I'd like to see you tonight, if you're agreeable." "Of course." That evening, Owen took her to a spot overlooking the valley, where they spread a blanket and watched the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. They talked of small things, deliberately avoiding mention of his imminent departure. As twilight deepened into night, Owen turned to her. "Olivia, there's something I need to say before I go." She braced herself for gentle rejection, for kind words about their friendship and how he'd remember her fondly. "I've lived most of my adult life on the move," he began, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. "I told myself it was the job, the responsibility, but the truth is, I never found a reason to stay still." He took her hand. "Until now." Olivia's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that in 1 week, you've made me question every notion I had about my future." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I have to go tomorrow, duty demands it, but I'm asking if I might come back. Not as a detective passing through, but as a man with purpose." "Owen, I'm 38 years old," she whispered. "Half the town calls me an old maid behind my back. The other half says it to my face. And I'm 42, with nothing to offer but a life that's been solitary too long." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Age is just a number that tells how long we've been waiting to find what matters." Tears blurred Olivia's vision. "You can't mean, I mean exactly what I'm saying. I've spent my life tracking people who run from their pasts or their responsibilities. I'm done running from my future." His voice grew softer. "If you'll have me, that is." Olivia couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotions she'd long since buried. Owen misinterpreted her silence. "I'm moving too fast. Forgive me. We've only known each other a week, and no," she interrupted, finding her voice. "It's not too fast. It's that I'd given up hope of ever hearing words like these." His smile in the moonlight made her heart skip. "Then I'll need to make up for lost time." They returned to town hand in hand, ignoring the curious stares of those still out and about. At her door, Owen kissed her gently at first, then with a passion that made her dizzy. "I'll come back to you," he promised when they finally parted. "You have my word." "I'll hold you to it," she replied, touching his cheek. The next morning, Olivia watched from her shop window as Owen mounted his horse and rode out of town with 2 other Pinkerton agents who had arrived overnight. He paused at the edge of town, turning to look back at her window, and raised his hand in farewell. Days passed with excruciating slowness. Olivia threw herself into her work, creating hats more elaborate and beautiful than any she'd made before. Townsfolk noticed the change in her, a new vibrancy, a softness around her eyes. Rumors circulated about the spinster milliner and the handsome detective. Some scoffed at the notion, declaring Olivia Lawson too old for romance, too set in her ways. Others, particularly the older women of Copper Creek, watched with knowing eyes and approving nods. 2 weeks after Owen's departure, a letter arrived. The bank robbers had been apprehended near the Wyoming border after a brief shootout. No one had been seriously injured, though Owen mentioned a scratch that had delayed his return. A scratch, Olivia muttered, knowing full well how men understated their injuries. Still, he wrote that he expected to be back in Copper Creek within the week, after delivering the prisoners and completing his reports. A week stretched into 2, then 3. Olivia's hope began to waver. Perhaps upon reflection, away from the isolated charm of their small town, Owen had reconsidered his feelings. Perhaps she had been a momentary distraction, a pleasant companion in an otherwise tedious assignment. Then came the telegram that stopped her heart. Agent Yates injured, stop recovering, Denver hospital, stop asking for you, stop transportation arranged, if willing, stop reply, Pinkerton office, Denver, stop within hours. Olivia had closed her shop, packed a small trunk, and boarded the afternoon train to Denver, leaving a hastily scrawled note on her door explaining her absence. The journey gave her ample time to worry. How badly was he hurt? Would he still want her when she arrived? Was she making a fool of herself, rushing to a man's side who might have changed his mind? Denver's bustling streets and towering buildings overwhelmed her after the quiet of Copper Creek. A Pinkerton agent met her at the station, explaining that Owen had been shot during the capture of the last gang member, a wound more serious than initially thought, complicated by infection. He's been asking for you since they brought him in, the young agent said as they rode in a carriage to the hospital. Drove the nurses half mad with it. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Olivia followed a stern-faced nurse. At last, they stopped outside a private room. He's still weak, the nurse cautioned. Don't excite him. Olivia nodded, then stepped into the room. Owen lay against white pillows, his normally tanned face pale, his strong body diminished by illness. But his eyes, those green eyes that had captivated her from their first meeting, lit up at the sight of her. You came, he whispered, reaching for her hand. Of course I came, she replied, taking his hand between both of hers. How could I not? I'm sorry, he began. I promised to return sooner. Hush, she interrupted. You're healing. That's all that matters. For the next week, Olivia rarely left his side. She read to him, helped the nurses change his bandages, and simply sat with him when pain made conversation difficult. Each day brought improvement, color returning to his face, strength to his voice, determination to his recovery. On the 8th day, as evening settled over Denver, Owen asked her to help him sit up. I have something to say, he insisted when she protested that he should rest. Something I've been thinking about since I woke up in this bed and realized how easily it all could have ended. Owen, please, Olivia. Let me speak while I have the courage. He took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. I nearly died without telling you properly how I feel. I won't make that mistake again. Olivia's heart pounded as Owen continued. In my line of work, I've seen how fragile life can be, how quickly it can change or end. This bullet taught me I can't waste any more time. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. I love you, Olivia Lawson. I love your strength, your grace, your quiet dignity. I love how you've built a life of meaning despite what others might see as limitations. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. Owen, let me finish, he said gently. The doctor says I'll need months to fully recover. I've handed in my resignation to the agency. My time as a Pinkerton is over. Because of the injury? Because I've found something more important than chasing outlaws across the frontier. He squeezed her hand. If you'll have me, I want to build a life with you in Copper Creek or anywhere else you'd like to go. Olivia could scarcely believe what she was hearing. You're certain? You won't regret giving up your work, settling down with the woman I love? Owen finished for her. The only thing I regret is that it took a bullet to make me see what truly matters. 2 months later, Olivia stood in her shop, making final adjustments to a wedding veil her own. Owen had recovered enough to travel back to Copper Creek, though he still walked with a slight limp that the doctor said might never fully disappear. The town had been abuzz with gossip when they returned together, Owen leaning on a cane, Olivia supporting his other side. But to her surprise, the reaction had been largely positive. Even Mrs. Holloway, the staunchest defender of propriety, had conceded that true love knows no proper season. Only a few voices muttered about desperation and last chances, but Olivia found she no longer cared what they thought. She was too busy helping Owen renovate the empty storefront next to her millinery, where he planned to open a gun repair shop once his strength fully returned. The bell above her door jingled, and Olivia looked up to see her fiancé enter, moving more easily now without his cane. "Almost ready?" he asked, glancing at the veil in her hands. "Just finishing the edge," she replied. "Still certain you want to marry an old maid?" Owen crossed to her, taking the delicate veil and setting it carefully aside before drawing her into his arms. "What I'm certain of," he said, his voice low, "is that I've never seen anything more beautiful than you in this moment, and that the years ahead of us will be the best of my life." He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and passion that still made her knees weak. "Besides," he added when they finally parted, "I'm hardly a young buck myself. We match, you and I perfectly seasoned for the journey ahead." The wedding took place on a brilliant autumn day, with leaves turning gold and crimson on the mountains surrounding Copper Creek. Olivia wore a gown of ivory silk with the delicate veil she had crafted herself. Owen stood tall and straight, only the slight tension around his eyes betraying the effort it took to stand without his cane. When it came time for their vows, Owen surprised her by departing from the traditional words. "Olivia," he said, his voice carrying clearly to the last row of the small church, "they called you too old to wed, but they didn't know what I know, that age brings wisdom, patience, and a heart that loves more deeply for having waited. Today, as I take your hand and pledge my life to yours, I say without reservation, you're my bride, now and always, and I thank God every day for bringing me to your door." There wasn't a dry eye in the church as Olivia responded with her own vows, promising to love and cherish the man who had seen beyond society's narrow expectations to the woman beneath. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her hand first, a gesture that had become special between them, before claiming her lips in a kiss that drew cheers from the assembled guests. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Owen's leg pained him in cold weather, and Olivia discovered that marriage after decades of independence required adjustments. But they faced each challenge together, their love deepening with each passing season. Their gun repair and millinery shops thrived side by side, becoming a cornerstone of Copper Creek's Main Street. Owen's former connections with the Pinkerton agency occasionally brought interesting visitors, and Olivia's hats gained renown throughout Colorado. 3 years after their wedding, they took in 10-year-old twins, a boy and girl orphaned when their parents' wagon overturned crossing a river. The children, initially suspicious and withdrawn, blossomed under Owen and Olivia's care, filling their home with laughter and new purpose. On their 5th anniversary, Owen presented Olivia with a small journal bound in soft leather. "What's this?" she asked, running her fingers over the cover. "Open it," he urged. Inside, in Owen's careful handwriting, was the story of their meeting, how he'd walked into her shop that summer evening and found the woman who would change his life. "I never want to forget a moment of our story," he explained. "Even when we're old and gray, well, grayer," he amended with a smile, touching the silver strands that had multiplied in both their hair. "We were supposed to be too old for this," Olivia mused, leaning against his shoulder as they sat on their porch watching the twins play in the yard. "Too old for love, for marriage, for raising children." Owen's arm tightened around her. "The best things in life don't come with age limits, my love. We're living proof of that." As twilight settled over Copper Creek, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Olivia Yates reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from resigned spinster to beloved wife and mother. Society had been wrong about her, about what was possible, about the capacity of the heart to find love at any age. Owen's lips brushed her temple. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" "How glad I am that you walked into my shop that day," she replied honestly. "How different my life would be if you hadn't." "I was meant to find you," he said simply. "Some things are just meant to be, no matter how long they take." As stars appeared in the darkening sky and their children's voices called them inside for supper, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that he was right. Their love had come not too late, but precisely when it was meant to, when they were ready to recognize it for the precious gift it was. And in the years that stretched before them, filled with ordinary days and extraordinary moments, that gift would continue to grow, proving that the heart never grows too old to love deeply, completely, and without reservation.